Ralph,
Here.
Voorhees, Leahy,
Here.
Gamba,
Here.
Davis, Godus,
Here.
Ingram.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this point, I would open it up to anyone in the public who would like to speak to us about any item that is not on this evening's agenda. Just please, if you would give us your name and address.
Okay. My name is Deborah Williams. I live at 511 8th Street in Glenwood here. Been here 41 years. I'm a member of the Historical Preservation Committee. And I put something in your packets, a little book about the woman for whom the tree at 11th and Grand was planted. And I was wondering about the possibility about having that tree lit once again. It's been lit since 1950, but the last couple of years it has not. I talked to the, it was planted in memory of a lady who just loved Glenwood's children. She was kind of an angel to them. She'd have them all to her house at Christmas, and she'd bake them cookies. Her only daughter was 3 years old when she died, so this lady adopted all Glenwood's kids. She went to every school pageant and program, and she just loved her kids. Anyway, the tree was planted 85 years ago in her memory this year, and it's been lit as a city tree since 1950. And I was just wondering if there was any interest in lighting it again, or I talked to the county, and Mr. Jankowski said it would cost them $10,000 because they'd have to hire a crane. And I wondered if the city maybe owns a crane, if it could be done for less, or if it could be lit from underneath with solar lights or something. But anyway, I just wanted to see if there was any interest and if it could be done feasibly.
All right,
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to us about something not on this evening's agenda? At this point, I would open up for any council comments. Go ahead, Shelley.
I just wanted to say that I was fortunate enough to attend the Colorado Rural Housing Coalition, their fall conference on Monday and Tuesday. It was great to learn there's a wide variety of tools that are being used by different communities on the Western Slope. And there was a common agreement that community housing for the local workforce is a very critical centerpiece of economic strength and to all of our communities. The coalition's going to put together a 1 to 2 page summary and a message for elected officials at the local and state level, and they hope to build support for a statewide initiative to allow communities to opt into a real estate transfer tax in the future. So.
Like a statewide real estate transfer tax?
Well,
Or
they'd like to get something on the ballot in the future so that it would be allowed statewide, at least that local communities or counties could opt in if they wanted to.
That'd be neat.
Yeah.
Glad to see that they're looking at this as a large problem and not a problem that a few people can solve, which is kind of a direction I think this whole thing started with, is let's tax the person who's able to build just because they can actually bring the product to us. And it's actually a bigger problem than that.
Right.
And if it's solved by everybody, then there's actually maybe a solution in there. But I think solving it by a few people is not the direction to go. So it's good to hear that they're looking at ways to bring the entire community and maybe even the entire state into the issue.
And that's just one funding tool. There are quite a few discussed. So.
All right, thanks, Shelley. Jim?
Yeah, I was out taking a walk today and saw the work going on at the shoreline at Veltus, and Mayor, I'm not sure if now's the right time or at the city manager's comments, but I was wondering if we could get a 2 or 3 minute update on that project and just understand if it's on schedule and how it's going.
I was just looking to see if, sorry, I was just looking to see if Brian was in the audience.
He is.
Oh.
Yes, the shoreline work is going well. We are a little behind schedule. We are looking at starting work of 3 Mile next week. We'll be moving over there. We have about another week of restoration work along Veltus, depending on how quickly we can get some rock imported. We hope to get work started fairly quickly over at 3 Mile. We have a traffic control plan. We will be closing portions of the Atkinson Trail so we can bring down trucks to unload the rock there. And then we'll be doing some vegetation work at Veltus and restoring some of the grass and putting things back in place. And there will be a rail fence that'll be installed there also. But yeah, work is progressing quickly. We hope we'll be able to open the park shortly. And we have probably another few more weeks of out-of-water work that will happen around the park area.
And Brian, it seems like the contractor's working sort of 24/7, basically. Are there any fiscal ramifications of, what appears to be perhaps maybe a more complicated project than they had anticipated?
No, the contractor requested to work extended hours, and that was approved by the city manager. We've worked very closely with the engineering department. We are limited by a number of different things, including our dewatering permits and our in-water work window that's dictated by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And so everything's a very complicated orchestra of timing. And so to make sure that we meet all those deadlines, he did ask for some extended work hours.
Thanks for the update.
You bet.
Thanks, Jim. Any other council comments?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you wanted to have, or we could do it at the end. I don't know if I have a report on this or brief conversation about Amendment 74 and kind of where council's at in terms of bringing back resolution in support of our opposition of that. For the public's benefit, Amendment 74 is an amendment to the, oh, sorry, keep forgetting. The big push to talk sign? That one. All right, let me try that again. Amendment 74 is a constitutional amendment that would require, and I think the language in it is that just compensation of private property has a reduced fair market value by government law or regulation. I would say that while that sounds great on its surface, there is a well-defined kind of set of legal principles around regulatory takings, which is really what we're talking about here, that has gone up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a framework we work in all the time that allows for things like regulations of general applicability. What's being proposed in Amendment 74 would mean literally any action you take as a government or inaction that you take as a government could require you to pay the differential in a change in fair market value that could be tied to that action. So let's take an example of, say, short-term rentals regulations. You could face having to pay compensation to both sides. If you adopted regulations, say, limiting the number of them, there would be a number of homeowners who would say, you have reduced the value of my property and by X amount over X amount of time because you did not allow me to pursue this property right. There could be, on the flip side, in those neighborhoods where you did permit a short-term rental or a VRBO or Airbnb, a homeowner could say, I can show you that you have reduced my fair market value because you allowed one of these in my neighborhood. And so literally the city could be paying money out for having adopted regulations or for having not adopted regulations, or having adopted regulations and paying both sides still. So it is a potentially devastating type of amendment. We've seen this before in another state, in Oregon. Similar constitutional amendment was passed. These are oftentimes funded by large out-of-state interests that are going after specific regulations that they feel are inappropriate in their industry, and so it's a way to force the state or county or local governments to pay compensation. It lasted about 3 years, cost hundreds of millions of dollars in Oregon for local and statewide jurisdictions. It was ultimately repealed by the voters, would have a significant impact. I will tell you, your legal budget would skyrocket. And it would really make things as simple as adopting a comp plan, or the new land use development code would be a great example. That you could take a look at that code and it's going to change property rights a little bit in terms of how you develop or what your standards are. And a property owner could argue that that's a diminution in value. It's reduced their fair market value, and so you need to write them a check. those are the kinds of impacts it could have for us. So it's fairly significant. Obviously, you can tell from where I'm coming from what I think of Amendment 74. I think it will be devastating for local government, local communities. The question for you all is, if you feel similarly, do you want a resolution on the next agenda in opposition to this? I do think oftentimes we don't take positions on a ballot measure like this. This is one, though, that will have a direct impact on you as a local government. So from my standpoint, I think it would be appropriate if you wanted to act on it, but it's certainly you guys' call.
I would be in favor of that.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
I would
certainly
suggest
like
we
to
word
see
it
that.
fairly strongly too, so that they get the point, so there's no gray area in there, that this is not what we're looking for up here.
Yeah, and I do think that having community leaders like yourselves come out strongly and talk about how it would impact, and we'll do that in the resolution, how it would impact community services, so people in our communities, sometimes it's easy to see that language and go, oh, that sounds like a great idea. It's very simple and straightforward, and why shouldn't they? And you don't understand what this larger impact is, and so I think it's really our job to make sure that people understand the impacts it could have on the level of services that we provide as a local government.
I mean, some recent obvious examples would be the completion of 8th Street that changed traffic patterns, or the new Grand Avenue Bridge, or the new improvements to 27th Street Bridge that we're looking at. Each one of those are going to have some impacts on adjacent properties or properties that are accessed by them, and so it would pretty much hamstring government from doing anything.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll bring a resolution back at the next regular council meeting in October.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. I do have one council comment as well. I would just like to make an announcement to the general public that there will be a ribbon cutting for the School Street improvements at the intersection of 11th and School Street. That project was funded in part by a federal Mineral East District grant, and so we have invited the FMLD board and the public to come to that ribbon cutting. Any further council comments? All right, seeing none, I would move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda this evening consists of the following: receipt of minutes of the September 6, 2018 regular meeting, award of bid documents for the wastewater collection system slip lining project, an IGA agreement for the 27th Street Bridge construction, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs authorizing and supporting the application for a Levitt grant from the Mortimer and Mimi Levitt Foundation. Second reading of ordinance number 21, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending section 020.020.020, 030.020.030, 060.090.020 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code pertaining to the composition, powers, and duties of the Building Board of Appeals. And that's it. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion by Shelley and a second by Todd to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Glenwood Springs Elementary School school zone. Hi, Jessica.
Good evening. I'm not sure, I know you guys have looked at this map yet. I can bring it up. I don't know if you want me to go through all the signage that we're proposing individually, or if you just have questions to ask.
I guess from my own perspective, I'm wondering about the value in making the school street extend all the way to the high school. Am I correct that the Carl, or was it Terry at the last meeting that said that high schools aren't eligible for school zones or something like that? Is that the case?
Not 100%. So we can, it's at the city engineer's discretion to, or the traffic engineer of the city's discretion to sign things as school zones. Traditionally, Safe Routes to School funding isn't, high schools are not eligible. So we wouldn't be able to get any, if we wanted to make improvements on that section, we wouldn't be able to get funding for that. They only fund projects for K through 8 schools. So, and right now the high school is signed as a school zone. It's signed at the corner of Grand and 14th. It's signed on Coach Miller Drive as you're coming in. And then it's signed at 14th and Pitkin as you're coming in for like half a block. And then there's a 25-mile-an-hour sign, and then it drops back into a school zone. When I talked to the police department, they recommended just making all of Pitkin 20 mile an hour regardless of where the school zones are, just because when you have a drop in speed, it's confusing to the driver. So it would be better for their enforcement.
So that is possible. And okay, I'm not sure when we're supposed to ask questions, but
well, right now.
I'll wait. Or did you have more of a presentation, or is this just kind of a question and answer thing? Because
I did revise the map to kind of indicate where the existing signage is versus what's proposed and what's going to be removed and or relocated. So everything in black is what's existing. And I do have photos of most of these signs out there. I have some end school zone signage that's proposed, installing signage on all of 9th, 10th, and 11th as you're entering Pitkin, so that people coming from those directions know that there's a school zone coming up, as well as some striping. The caveat with this is, since Terry Wilson's been with the PD, he hasn't recognized any instances of any injuries or accidents out there. So we can install signs, we could leave it the way it is, we could put striping in as well. These are maintenance costs to the city. You know, we have to make sure that the striping is maintained, but we've been adding striping everywhere, so.
I'm just really excited to see what we did at 10th and Pitkin. And
11th.
Yeah, is that?
That's 11th.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, no, here. So at 10th?
Down here.
Yeah. I mean, with the flashing lights now and stuff. Because when I first got on council, I actually suggested that, and nobody would like my idea. And now we actually have them. So it's really nice to see them there. I lived a house in from the corner of that, and I used to watch little kids look back and forth and do the, like, run. And it just looks so dangerous to me. So, I mean, I would love to suggest that all of Pitkin all the way down become 20 miles an hour so it isn't confusing, so the high school kids don't go 35 or 40 and then slow down to whatever they're going to slow down to.
Right.
I think it'd be great if Pitkin, because a lot of the kids use that as the trail back and forth to their houses before they cut up into the neighborhood.
Right.
And the high school kids, to be honest with you, could use 20 miles an hour all the way down, because a lot of them park from 14th north as far as they need to find a parking space.
Right. And down here at 14th, there is an existing school zone sign. There's you can't see it too well here, but there's a remove existing end of school zone because it's only that block. So I would have that removed, and then we would just maintain the
20 because we're
miles an
almost
hour.
then only like a block of not having it.
Right, and it
So
bumps,
if it
the speed
was-
limit does bump up to
Right,
25 miles an hour, so.
If the school zone started at 11th Street, which is the access to the elementary
To the
school,
new
there'd be-
yeah.
there'd be 2.5 blocks of
Of nothing.
Right.
no school zone, and you know, there's no, I agree with your comments about, you know, what we had proposed 7 years ago on 10th Street, and now we not only have that on 10th Street with a four-way stop there, we have it on 11th Street, which is critical because that is now the main access to the elementary school.
Correct.
I guess just in the interest of not creating laws that no one is going to adhere to, my thought is that 2.5 blocks ought to remain 25 miles an hour. And maybe this is going to make it sound like it's a very selfish thing, but I think it is a practical thing. I drive it at least 4 times a day to and from work and to home to lunch and back, and I don't see too many people speeding on it. And
These two have helped.
yeah,
These two
yeah, and
sections
so,
have helped a bunch.
you know, and so that's the only part of this that I have any, you know, and I'm not going to fall on my sword over it, but that I have any disagreement with is I do think that from 11th to 13th and a half or whatever, like we have right now, it ought to remain a 25-mile-an-hour road. I mean, people are going to have to slow down at 11th because there's a stop sign there. So, you know, anyway, Shelley.
I was just going to say that I do feel like I'd like to see that extended the whole way on Pitkin, just because it is a very kind of densely populated residential street. You have a lot of pedestrian traffic coming down 12th Street and heading down to the River Trail, and the combination of high school drivers and elementary kids walking to school and getting dropped off, especially during those school hours when that school zone is in effect, is, I think, worth, you know, having the extra 2 blocks be at the 20-mile-an-hour zone. And it's just an extra reminder for mainly those high school drivers. I'm sure our mayor drives the speed limit, but
I do.
You know, I just think it's an extra safety feature, and a lot of school zones can, you know, they'll a lot of times project out a half a mile or from the school.
Yeah,
kind of radially. So I think it would certainly encompass that extra block.
It just depends on the route, the designated safe routes to school that goes along with the education of the students and the parents as well. Mm-hmm. When I talked to Chief Wilson, he said that there was a lot more signage that used to be on the street, and over time it's been removed by previous city engineers and kind of mishmashed together. So I think from an engineering standpoint, we're supportive of either way.
Right. And with the recommendation from the police chief, though, you know, recommending that all be the school zone in the 20 miles an hour, I think is
John Hassel, whose chief was out when I went. Okay. He didn't necessarily care whether it was a school zone, but he thought that all of Pitkin should be signed 20 miles an hour. 20. Okay. Regardless of the school zone, just because you pick up to 25 for 2 blocks, and all the stop signs make it difficult to, you know, you're speeding up and slowing down. To even get there, right. Down, so.
Yep, that seems to make sense. On School Street then, will that be signed as 15 in both directions?
It is currently signed as 15.
Coming from the north, I think?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
So there's an existing sign heading north on the 1-2 lane block, and then there's 3 signs as you go south. So, and it's sign 15, and I think that's just the proximity to the school as well as the parent drop-off.
Right.
It's pretty, during drop-off and pickup, it's pretty difficult to go any faster.
Right.
So.
I think I had heard a comment that when you're coming from 11th, can you scroll down just a little bit? If you turn north on School that there wasn't a sign right in there that said the 15, but.
There isn't. On 10th, this intersection is signed as one way. So.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
So technically it's one way in that block?
It should be, but I think it's wide enough to be 2-way if we designate it that way.
I thought maybe the new design had gone to 2-way, yeah.
You know, do you recall, is there a sign at 11th saying it's 1-way down School? I actually can't remember. I'll check on that.
Are those arrows in the road, do they indicate that it's 2-way or not?
They do. This is the plan that we got from JBA when they did those improvements.
Okay, okay. All right, thanks, Jessica.
I think James is beeping there.
What's that?
James is beeping there.
Oh, whoops, sorry. Jim.
Yeah, a question I have, did you have a chance to show this current plan to any of the residents who live in the area?
I have not. We did show the previous. I edited this one a little bit to keep the school zone all the way to 14th, but the previous one went to the Transportation Commission the last meeting, so they reviewed it and they thought it was a good idea.
I'm sorry. Oh, to the Transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, I would just I might suggest it might make some sense to, run this by, and the reason I'm saying that, just to be clear, is Shelley and I had met with some of the residents there, and they had some very strong feelings. My conclusion, based on looking at your plan, is that it would be very responsive to what their concerns were, but I'd sort of hate to put something into place and have some people remain feeling that their concerns were not addressed. And I think it would be very easy step to just run this by them, and they feel they'll be part of the process, because they are part of the process.
Well, and I hope the previous Transportation Commission, we did have quite a few residents there, and this plan came directly from their comments. So hopefully this will address their comments, because these are what they raised in the meeting.
Okay, after the meeting, I can share with you the people that we had corresponded with. And okay, thank you.
Of course.
So what do we need here today to give you direction, or what do you need from us?
I think Terry is looking to find out if we want to install the additional signage, and if we want to install pavement markings, or just go with signage for now, or do both. And how far you want the school zone to extend to.
Well, I've already said this. I'd like the school zone on the whole street, just because it's confusing to me to only have 2 blocks not. And high school's confusing enough. So if we can keep the confusion down, if we can keep the confusion to a minimum for them down here, and just say go 20 miles an hour and get the striping, I like the yellow, because it kind of catches your attention that this is where you're at. And then the next one we can look at is back behind City Market on the college school zone there, because people fly through that area, and we have people parking all over the place at night, and so that's a dangerous little spot.
We've discussed that a lot. College is a whole other animal.
I know, that's a whole other animal. And then
and
once we do those two, we could just make the downtown 20 miles an hour, and then I'd be really happy. But we'll talk about that.
Just because you sign something 2 miles an hour doesn't mean people are going to go.
You'd probably like that too.
Yeah. Is that a motion?
We have to, I think we need to go ahead and see if anyone from the public would like to comment on this. Is there anyone out there who would have any comments on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council, and we can go ahead and make a motion.
Well, I would move that we have the entire length of School Street from 14th to wherever. Pitkin, I'm sorry, on what did I say?
School Street.
Oh, on Pitkin, down to 14th Street, and sign it and stripe it as necessary to alert the public and the high school kids that this is a school zone.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Shelley to essentially adopt the plan as presented to us. Is that a fair statement, or did what he asked change anything of what's in the plan?
No.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
The only other comment I would have, I intend to vote for that. I agree with the thought just for the 2 blocks, changing it back, and it's probably just not a good idea. But I know we have heard the comment that there haven't been accidents there. I think we're taking the wise choice here not to wait until we have one. There are inherent dangers when you take traffic and little kids and things like that in a residential area, and so I'm very comfortable we're making the right decision here. And the only thing I would ask and would want the residents to know who we've spoken with is, this was step 1 that we thought needed to be dealt with immediately because school is in session, and it is being dealt with. That's great. There remains on the agenda some other items, including, what our options might be to control large commercial traffic on the street. I don't know what those are yet. That's down the road a little ways, but we haven't forgotten about that one. That's my only comment.
Can I add to that? Thanks, Jim. That's a good reminder. And I completely agree with that. And the other item that we talked about was trying to make some of those, the striping improvements that we have at 10th and 11 right now for the traffic calming elements, trying to make those more permanent in the future.
I know this is the comment section of our discussion, but I have a question for you. Do you have any guesstimate of the cost? I know it's relatively minimal, but the total cost of implementing the plan in terms of signage and striping?
It's pretty minimal, now that we have a sign machine. I know that we have about $10,000 that we got from the county in order to put the striping at 10th. The striping at 11th hasn't been placed yet. Jake thinks that we'll have enough funds to do that, and I'm sure some of those funds, the county would be fine with us purchasing signs and installing them. So I would guess under $5,000. And probably
What does that mean? We have a sign machine. We make our own signs?
we can.
We can make stop signs?
Can,
Really?
I think. Matt can.
I didn't know we had
He
a
just
sign
got it
machine.
last year.
It's a brave new world
He
out there,
just got
Todd.
10 of them for me if you would, and then we'll discuss where they go.
Todd, they can make blue peas.
I didn't know we had our own sign machine. That means we got our
The
own
materials
stop sign
cost.
machine. We can just get them coming.
I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of trail signs.
Yeah, all blue peas, we're just putting them up all over town.
That's more than one, we'll be getting out of your post.
There you go.
All right, any other questions, comments? So just for everyone's recollection, we have a motion on the table to essentially adopt the school zone plan as presented by the staff. Any further comments? Call the question.
Ingram, yes. Godus, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Have our little light thing working?
Thanks.
Oh.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is planning item 12-18. It's consideration of a request for a special use permit for a medical marijuana business and retail marijuana establishment on the commercial CO district, formerly C3 General Commercial District. The applicant is Bush's LLC, Jack Pease. The owner is 172 LLC. Location is 172 West 6th Street. Good evening, Gretchen.
Good evening. I am presenting this application on Trent's behalf. So as you indicated, this application is a special use permit for retail and medical marijuana business at 172 West 6th Street. The project also includes interior and exterior remodeling of the existing building that's on the property, improving pedestrian access to the property from 6th Street, and adding landscaping. The property itself, oops. There we go. The property itself is about a quarter acre with the existing building that is just over 1,500 square feet, and this was formerly Chomp's Restaurant. The property is zoned CO, which is our new commercial zone district. It was formerly C3 under the old code. The surrounding land uses include several hotels, some restaurants, a car rental business, and a car repair service business. When considering special use permits for marijuana-related businesses, the municipal code requires that the proposal be evaluated based on a number of criteria. There are 4 general criteria that are applicable to all special review uses, and then there are 6 criteria that are specifically related to marijuana uses. So I'll jump right into the general criteria. The first includes safe pedestrian access to and across the site. This proposal removes an existing dilapidated wooden set of stairs that go from 6th Street down to the property, and instead the applicant is replacing that with an accessible ramp, a handicap accessible ramp that is concrete. And the applicant also proposes to stripe a pedestrian crosswalk or pathway across the parking lot to essentially the front door of the business. The second general criteria is ensuring adequate vehicular circulation, parking, and access. The access to this lot is actually through the neighboring property, which is Enterprise Rent-A-Car. The access is memorialized in an existing access and parking agreement that dates from the 1980s. Currently, the parking lot on the subject property, it has about 10 parking spaces, whereas 6 are required for this type of use. To improve the circulation, to construct that handicap ramp that I just referred to, the applicant will be removing 1 parking space, and then they will also then be striping the parking spaces on the property. One of the spaces will be striped for as a handicap space. Then the applicant will also be adding a bicycle rack. The access and parking the access and parking agreement between these 2 property owners allows the adjacent neighbor, i.e. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, to use the parking on this subject site as their overflow parking. So Enterprise has about 18 spaces on its lot, and so they are at their own will able to park their cars on this subject property according to that agreement. Then the next criteria is ensuring that this marijuana-related use is compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. As I mentioned before, the surrounding uses include general services, retail, restaurants, a mix of hotels. So retail marijuana sales is considered a commercial use, and therefore we found it compatible with the surrounding commercial nature of this neighborhood. And finally, the last criteria is mitigation of any potential negative impacts to the surrounding properties. As always, odor is always a concern with any marijuana-related business. The applicant, as I mentioned, is upgrading the interior and exterior of the property, and part of the upgrades include installing a high-efficiency exhaust system that includes carbon filters. And additionally, I understand from the application that the marijuana, the product, will be transported to the site already packaged. All right, so the next 6 criteria, as I mentioned before, are specific to marijuana-related businesses. We've already discussed the compatibility issue. We also discussed the odor mitigation. So regarding the other criteria, we found that the proposal meets the location restrictions. It is not within 500 feet of a school. It is also not within 900 feet of another marijuana-related business. It also meets the maximum storage requirements for the product on the site. And the hours of operation are within the code requirements. Finally, the final criteria deals with signage. The applicant will submit a separate sign permit application, and then we'll assess the compliance with the municipal code requirements at that time. And finally, as I mentioned, the exterior of the building will be significantly upgraded, and this includes adding a stucco wall treatment, stack stone along the foundation and up the building, up the sides of the building. And then we found that the proposed colors meet the municipal code, the design standards for earth tone requirement. So we always send these applications to our reviewing agencies for comments, and we did receive comments from the Public Works Department regarding backflow devices and reviewing the irrigation plans for the same, installing backflow devices. CDOT determined that an access permit for this business is not required. And then we also received a letter from Sunlight Holdings, which is the owner of the Enterprise rental car property. And they reminded us of that access and parking agreement that exists between the two property owners. The Planning and Zoning Commission met on August 28th, and in a 5-to-1 vote, they recommended that council approve this application. They discussed a number of issues, but I believe they spent the bulk of their time discussing vehicle access and parking on the subject property. The issue was the fact that the drive aisle on the subject property is only 17.3 feet wide, where the code requires about as 24 feet aisle width. The commission considered several options, including eliminating parking so the project could better meet the municipal code requirements. But ultimately it was determined that that existing parking and access agreement that exists between the two property owners made that problematic. Additionally, I'd like to point out that the city's engineering department did not comment on the sufficiency or insufficiency of that aisle width, and they consider it an existing condition, and the fact that the development didn't actually trigger the need to upgrade the parking for this particular use. The commission then also recommended that the applicant work with staff to plant additional trees along the Highway 6 frontage, and that was added as condition number 10 in your staff report. I'd like to point out, though, that I think the condition reads that up to 3 trees would be required, and working with staff to see if up to 3 trees could be planted along that frontage. There are other code requirements that preclude that. I think a maximum of 2 trees is all they could get on that frontage. So council has just one action item, and then that is consideration of the special use permit for the medical marijuana business and retail marijuana establishment in the CO zone district. Staff, again, Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval, and staff recommends that council uphold that recommendation with the findings on page 3 of your staff report and conditions on page 3 and 4. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Gretchen. Any questions for Gretchen before we open it to the applicant?
Gretchen, at the P&Z meeting, what was the conversation about neighborhood compatibility, or was there much about that?
I have to confess that I was on vacation during that meeting.
You're not allowed to do that.
So I would perhaps kick that question to the applicant, and they could probably address that, and I apologize. Or Jen, do you want to?
Gretchen, I had a quick question on the landscaping, because there's not much landscaping there along that front strip of the property. So do we have, it looks like there will be some nice landscaping going in with irrigation.
Right.
So that's my question, is that irrigated? And then do we have provisions in the code that needs to be maintained? And
we do have provisions that the owners, the immediately adjacent owner maintains the landscaping along their public frontage.
Okay.
And I have to assume that their landscaping does include an irrigation system.
I see it on the detail for the tree.
Yeah.
That there's a.
Okay. Again, I would ask that you confirm that with the applicant if you could.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Any other questions for Gretchen? All right, thanks, Gretchen. This time I'll open up to the applicant for your presentation.
Can we plug into the system so we can choose? I do, if it's okay with you, my name is Lauren Nayton. I'm an attorney in the area. I've met most of you before. I've been doing marijuana matters for a long time, so thank you for having us. I would like to real quick, there were some corrections that I'd like to make in the actual report so that I'm used to making sure the record is accurate. as an attorney. And so the applicant is not Bush's LLC, it's Glenwood Station LLC. Jack Pease, however, is correct. It's actually S. Jack Pease, Scott Jack Pease. It did say formerly something, C something, and it should be C3 on that staff report. Not that it matters, but those were corrections. Also on page 2 of the report, there was a, it said pedestrian access will be improved with concrete steps and with an ADA ramp. But those were just corrections in the record.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Lauren Maiden. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We just discussed is Glenwood Station LLC, doing business as the station. Jack Pease is here. He is the owner. Mike Greshik is here. He's from High Country Engineering. The station submitted an application for a special use permit to operate a medical and retail marijuana establishment, as you just heard. It was approved 5-1 on August 28th. The location of the proposed use is 172 West 6th. The former tenant is Chomps Deli, as you can see on the picture. It was a local eatery. It has now moved down the street, so you're not without Chomps. The project at 172 West 6th involves tenant interior improvements to allow for the new uses. The property was zoned C3, as you heard, which is General Commercial District. It was that way when we filed the application. Today it's known as CO, both of which allow marijuana establishments with a special use review. We will, as you heard, significantly improve the landscape, spruce up the exterior facade with new paint, stone, and signage. You did hear the property meets all the distance restrictions. What you didn't hear was that the station was founded in 2010 by Jack Pease. It was founded when his wife Toni was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. She was given 30 days to live. Mr. Pease was determined to help the love of his life survive. He started exploring additional treatment methods, and that included medical marijuana. Mr. Pease was successful. His wife survived for 7 years after he began administering medical marijuana medicines to his wife. During this difficult time, Mr. Pease opened up a medical marijuana center in Boulder. He was able to use that to help him care for his wife. He was able to help care for his wife and other patients that were similarly situated, that were in desperate need at this time of clean and effective medicines. They weren't that easy to find back then. Mr. Pease has been able to produce and provide quality medicines with high concentrations of CBD, free of toxins. Jack provides a superior medicine to good people. With every retail store he opens, he also opens up a medical store. Jack makes sure that he knows that the patients know he believes in those patients. The station, which has been solely owned by Mr. Pease since inception, has several locations currently operating. The Boulder station and the associated cultivation in Denver have been in operation since 2010. The Basalt station opened in June of 2018. And the new medical MIP and medical center in Rocky Ford and a cultivation in Colorado Springs should be open pretty soon, but definitely before the end of 2018. To better serve its patients and patrons, the station cultivates the vast majority of the medicines it sells. The proposed medical marijuana establishment at 172 West 6th Street is to be converted from this busy restaurant to a marijuana establishment. In your packets, I hope you have seen their site plans, floor plans, and building elevations. Through its operation as a marijuana establishment, Glenwood Station will offer for sale medical and retail marijuana and non-marijuana related products in full compliance with state and local laws. Glenwood Station will not offer home delivery. It's not legal. Inventory, as you heard, will be stored on-site within a secure, you didn't hear, within a secured vault room, and it will, what you did hear, equal less than 25%. I think it's 15.9% of the total square footage. The station's hours of operation, to be corrected, because I was going to correct that too, are actually from 9 to 8, not from 8 to 7, is what it said on the presentation. The application submitted 9 to 8, Monday through Sunday. The property, now, and if for some reason the store hours should demand, Mr. Pease and I had a conversation about this, if for some reason the hours should demand or the client's request that he stay open, he'll stay open as long as the code would permit and as long as it's economically feasible. But he is willing to listen to his patients. If they need more time to get to him and it's within the code, he's more than happy to adjust his hours if it pleases City Council. The property will be outfitted with robust lighting and enhanced security cameras, including motion detectors, panic buttons, and glass breakage sensors to ensure a safe and secure environment for the business, the employees, and the neighboring businesses and the community as a whole. ADT will monitor the property 24 hours a day. The project is compatible with the Glenwood Springs Comprehensive Plan and the Municipal Code and far exceeds the minimum standards outlined. This should alleviate any concern that we would barely clear such requirements. Moving on to the special criteria, special use permit criteria. Those are found in 070040040, the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code. It actually might have changed. The code numbers might have changed. So,
In the old, is
yeah, so I didn't revise that. The code numbers might have changed, so I apologize. But the proposal before you does meet those the required criteria for a special use permit by improving the property and enhancing the neighborhood. From the West 1st Street and West 6th Street sidewalks, one can access the business. The existing wooden steps behind you, that's what we were talking about. The existing wooden step from West 6th Street down to the elevation of the parking area will be replaced with an ADA compliant ramp from 6th Street, made of concrete as you heard, and a striped connection across the parking lot to the front entrance of the building will be added to better improve existing conditions and enhance safe access. We did spend considerable amount of time discussing this issue. It's connected with this parking issue, and one of the major issues was improving the access for the persons walking by and for persons who have any sort of disabilities. We toyed around with various designs. This was one that made sense. It takes up a large portion of the parking lot, but it made sense. It was safe, and it was very easily seen. So we felt that P&Z in particular felt it was a really good design. The parking lot, as was mentioned, will be restriped to make it fresh and new, and a bike rack will be added. As you heard, the site shares access with neighboring business enterprise rent-a-car, and it shares a parking easement. To get to the station's parking lot, access is from West 1st Street and proceeds through the enterprise parking area. The existing parking lot on site does provide 10 parking spaces. And historically, because we have asked and we've sought information as it related to this, historically there have been no problems with the size of the access corridor or the number of parking spaces. The current easement has proven to be safe and effective for the current tenants and their customers. In fact, it is common to see trucks towing big trailers, carrying rafts and other gear, going camping and such, pulling in and out of that parking lot without incident during busy hours. In fact, I had a long conversation with one such person who told me that he regularly pulled his big rig in there and his big truck and never had an issue whatsoever. That it all seemed no angry people. I mean, it was very hunky-dory, and he seemed to have done it often. An avid river runner, you would say. However, in order to improve access for all patrons, the number of parking spaces will be reduced to 8 standard and 1 ADA, totaling 9. Right now there are 10. So we're taking away 1 just to kind of make things a little bit wider, a little bit more visible, just a little bit more spacious. The parking spaces, as I mentioned, will be restriped, and a striped connection across the parking lot to the front entrance of the building will be added, as well as the bike rack. We did also take information, just so you're aware. We have heard that Enterprise and the neighboring hotels, Hampton Inn and Embassy Suite, although we have not confirmed this to be true, they may have an informal agreement that accommodates additional overflow parking needs that Enterprise may have. I spoke with several people who have used Enterprise, and they have told me specifically that Enterprise said, yeah, you're free to use that parking lot as well. So I don't know what the agreement is, if there is. I kind of tried to bark up down that alley, didn't get very far. But the people I spoke to that used Enterprise told me that story. And it wasn't one person, it was multiple. So hence the note. Odor control. The station uses a variety of effective odor mitigation strategies and standard operating procedures to control odors and contain them within the premises at all of their locations. Now I have to correct something that I don't want anything to be misleading, and I told this to P&Z as well. So maybe you weren't there and didn't hear this, but it's not prepackaged as in what a customer is going to purchase when they walk in. Okay, it's not that kind of prepackaged. It is packaged and sealed as it should be, properly transported to the business. It is taken into the business, into a secured room, and then it is opened up. In that secured room, there is a high efficiency exhaust fan in conjunction with high efficiency carbon filters and bulk, and like I said, the bulk packaging of flowered marijuana in sealed containers that's authorized by MED before it comes in. All of these strategies minimize those odors. One of the things I can tell you about the system that's being put in place is that there's a complete air change every 35 minutes. This facility is not connected with any neighbors. There's no wall sharing. It is also not a cultivation. Those are the situations that it seems like there has been some discontent. And so I wanted to put those right out in front of you. In this situation, with this type of system, there have been no problems in basalt. As we mentioned, the basalt facility is in operation. It is 2.5 times bigger than this, and there is only one additional fan. There are no problems. There is a neighbor above, and there's a neighbor on the side. The only complaints that have been received are from people smoking cigarettes in an alley, and they're not his employees. So that's the type of complaint that they've gotten as it relates to odors. The efficiency of the system that they're using is good. It also should be noted that the standard operating procedures will provide for a replacement of the carbon filters prior to even the manufacturer's recommendations to ensure proper odor control. Now, as we mentioned to P&Z, we're more than happy to revisit this issue if there's any complaint whatsoever. My client is incredibly amenable to making sure that everybody's happy. But he does know that this system is in place. It's in place in all of his stores, and he has not had any complaints. And all of them have odor control provisions. So the high efficiency exhaust fans are Newtone QT-XEN 110. I don't know if you guys want to know this stuff. They did. Capable of 110 CFM, high efficiency carbon filters are Airbox 2, capable of 800 CFM, and there's a ventilation plan attached. So, lighting. Currently, the site is lit by 2 existing street lights within Highway 6 and 24 right-of-way. The project seeks to improve the lighting by adding 4 exterior wall lights in the front of the building and 3 motion floodlights around the perimeter of the building for additional light and safety. Do you want to know the type of lights?
I'm good.
Exterior wall lights are Kitchener Seaside 1.
As long as they meet our code.
Yeah, they're pursuant to your code.
Yeah.
They're pursuant to your code. I'll skip that. The landscaping. Currently, there are several coniferous and deciduous trees around the east, west, and south sides of the existing building. There are existing railroad-tied planter beds at the entrance to the building on the north side filled with fading shrubs and flowers, and a concrete patio located on the east side of the building that is also filled with some waning shrubs and flowers. There is also currently a grassed area on the south and southeast sides of the building. Landscape improvements will be used to enhance the property and add some flora and some color. Landscape will be significantly improved with the addition of 1, possibly 2 street trees, whatever is decided upon with the police and the city and the community development. Originally, we had talked about a Kentucky coffee tree, which is one of the approved trees, but we're going back to the drawing board because of the way that tree grows. The bottom line about trees is that we really didn't want to shield a police car from traveling down 6th Street and be able to see clearly what's going on. For security purposes, we want to make sure that there's no hiding behind shrubbery that's meant to beautify. And so, given that fact, when we had a big discussion about the Kentucky coffee tree, we decided that was the wrong tree, and we decided that there will be 2, they wanted maybe 3. I've spoken with P&Z, and that's not doable given other significant portions of the code. So we know that it'll be 1 or 2, whatever is decided, and we will defer to whatever tree is decided as well. The point was that buffering was important, but it's also important to create an aesthetically pleasing environment without creating those blind spots. We are going to add shrubbery and plantings, including all things that are on your list, perennials, annuals. I could tell you what kinds if you were interested. But I don't think that you want to go there. Irrigation, however, is something you'd like to hear about. And irrigation does start at the beginning of the property and goes all the way around. So it is actually irrigating the front planter beds, the side planter bed, as well as 6th Street. There is irrigation in place already, and it will be added to. It will use perforated drip lines, and they will be maintained by the property owner.
Okay, thanks.
The site will be cleared of excess and overgrown vegetation and debris that's already on the site to obviously enhance the overall appearance of the property. The scope of the improvements to the architectural elements of the existing structure, they're fairly limited. There are no significant modifications that have been proposed. Exterior improvements, however, new stucco in the subtle earth tones, a limited amount of stone veneer will be added to the front of the building to improve the overall aesthetics, and stone samples and paint palettes have been provided. They're at least in your packet. Traffic. The existing operation of the property is Chomp's Deli, produces approximately 250 to 300 customer trips per day. I don't know if you want to know all this jargon, but per the ITE trip generation, blah, 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 CDOT has confirmed there are no additional access permits that are required for the project. That's the bottom line of that traffic analysis. But because the project meets or exceeds your guidelines, we ask that you approve the project. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any questions for Ms. Mayton, the applicant? Did you want to ask your earlier question?
Yeah, I guess, talk to me a little bit about in planning and zoning, if there was any concern about neighborhood characteristic, if there's anybody that appeared before planning and zoning that spoke up against this location or this business or anything like that.
So nobody showed up to comment. We did provide some public outreach comment that we did. The neighbors seemed to be enthusiastically inviting to us. The concern was about the easement, simply from the property owner, and it wasn't that it was a problem, simply make sure you're aware, and that's how it was approached to us as well. And when Jack was buying the property, that's how it was approached to him as well. We've thought about it, but nobody came up to say anything. We thought about that somebody might say, oh, smoking, and, smoking's a problem, and people need to not smoke unless in designated areas, whether it's cigarette smoke or tobacco or marijuana smoke. So we're firm believers in abiding by the law. but nobody came to speak out about it. Nobody came to object, and we did provide in our packet. I think there might have been everybody was in favor. I think there might have been one person we spoke to that said there were enough, but we didn't have any negative. We would give it to you. We would have presented it to you. We're in the hopes of full disclosure, but we didn't have any comments from anybody. Like I said, I think we had one comment that was, there are a lot of dispensaries. And that was it. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Were you able to get at the comment section? The public outreach? Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Yes. At this point, I would open up to any public who would like to comment on this application. Don't all jump up at once. All right, seeing none, I will close it to public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and ultimately leading to a motion. See, Todd, you got your button pushed first.
So I appreciate both staff's presentation and also the applicants. This was very thorough, so it was really nice to have everything right here. I think that's why you're not hearing a lot of questions. It's very good, very well presented tonight. So my neighbor 20 some odd years ago used to own that building when it was a radio station, and it hasn't had many improvements since. I'm sure Jack knows that. So it's exciting to see that the outside of that can get a facelift, that we can get some new energy in there. I'm really glad that Chomps relocated down the street, which I think is going to be a great location for Chomps and for the city to have Chomps down there by our North Landing site. So they, if you will, landed in a nice spot. And so to me, this is just kind of a win-win-win all the way around for us. So again, excited to see the improvements to the building, and great presentation. As far as I'm concerned, this is a slam dunk. I don't see even any variances. It looks like you've met and exceeded everything in our code. So for me, that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks, Todd. Jim?
Yeah, thank you. A couple thoughts. One is I agree with you, Todd, in terms of the presentation and the plans for the building physically, and they're very, very good and impressive. I'm pleased with the parking plan to reduce it. I was a frequent visitor to Chomps, and I can tell you the parking there was hairy. You may have heard some stories that it worked fine. It was a little hairy in there, to be honest with you. It was the sandwiches were fantastic, but the parking experience was difficult. So I'm pleased to hear that you're reducing that. I'm interested in hearing, I guess, comments from my other council members. I do have one concern, and it does relate to the compatibility of the business to the neighborhood. And let me describe my logic, or kind of what I'm struggling with a little here. I noticed in our code there's we don't allow certain businesses, including marijuana businesses, within so many feet of a school. And I don't remember how many feet, but that is in there, and it was addressed earlier. And I was thinking, well, why is that? And it's probably not because we think that the 4th and 5th graders are good from the elementary school are going to walk in and buy something. That's not why that's in there for them to be removed. Frankly, I don't know how we came up with the number of feet, and I don't know exactly what the reason was, but there had to be something about the business near where there are a lot of children walking by, not going in, not buying, just walking by. And when I think about this location, there are a lot of hotels there. There can be a lot of families and a lot of young children walking by. And so I'm struggling with that, the disparity, if you will, between saying they need to be removed from where children will walk by if it's near a school, and yet the same number of children are walking by because of all the tourist hotels there. So I want to throw out that's a concern I'm weighing in my head, and I'm open to to hearing, the comments of my fellow council members. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Any other comments?
Sure, you know what, you're.
No, go ahead.
All right. I echo Jim. I think that having our out-of-town guests at those hotels walking by is maybe not entirely consistent with our family-friendly attraction town, but it's not in the downtown core. We don't have any, I don't see that we have a way to actually, through our code, deny this application because it's asking for no variance. It's in an area that's been zoned as appropriate for it. And so I'm supportive of it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Shelley?
And I'll just briefly agree with Todd's comments. Great job on the application and the thoroughness of it. As far as weighing, the neighborhood compatibility, I believe there's a liquor store over on 6th Avenue as you get closer to the bridge area. And I realize that legally, the country's kind of in transition on allowing recreational and marijuana, but, for my purposes, I kind of put it in the same category as alcohol, and it's legal in the state of Colorado. We seem to have no problem with having children walk by liquor stores and be part of that culture, but for some reason, marijuana has always had a different place in the culture. But I tend to put it, in my mind, it's on about the same level as alcohol, and the appearance of the building is very kind of nondescript. I don't see a large marijuana leaf on the sign. I don't know what the plans are there, but I don't have a problem with it as far as neighborhood compatibility either. I would like to see strict compliance with the odor regulation, but sounds like that's being addressed, so thanks.
Thanks,
Sounds
Shelley.
like we could make them big blue P signs now for the parking lot.
We could.
We have that ability now.
We could do that.
You guys you should not have told me that.
I can see where this is going.
So in an attempt to address Jim's comments about why the code asked for a setback from schools, I guess I know you weren't our attorney at that time.
Well, actually, to be really honest with you, there's a couple of things going on there. One is that there is a state statute that addresses the setback. So that's part of it. The other part was some of those distances, both between businesses and near schools, were really carefully thought out in terms of trying to not have groupings of these, of establishments really close to each other, whether in the downtown core or in other places. And so the combination of using the setback from schools along with the setback from each other had the effect of spreading them out in the community, so it's not affecting one particular neighborhood at a differential rate.
Right. Okay. That was my recollection, but I figure I'll let the attorney.
The distance between businesses came at great expense of the council at the time, where we got it wrong at first. And then the room filled up until 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, that night, and we changed those distances. So that had gone through some serious vetting with the community, and I think originally we were at 300 feet, which did allow one on each block, and the community was like, no, not right. So that's where we went to 900 feet, and you see the circles and where this fits now, and it actually does meet all those requirements that were vetted very seriously by the community. Until like 1 or 2 in the morning.
That was the longest meeting we've had since I've been back.
Yeah. And that was with the Leo rule of anytime after 11, it had to be unanimous.
Yeah. All right, Jonathan.
Just one more thing, I think the other thing that I'm encouraged by is it was a 5-1 vote for, on P and Z, so our city board has weighed in on that, not unanimously, but fairly overwhelmingly, and there's no one here to speak really either for or against it, so, there's, it's not like the community or neighborhood is up in arms, and so because of that, I'd like to move to affirm the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the special use permit request with the findings and conditions listed on page 3 and 4 of the staff report. Is that right? Did I do that right?
Yep. We have a motion by Jonathan. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Jonathan and a second by Shelley to affirm the decision of the Planning Commission after finding that I'm on the wrong.
Page 3. Page 3.
Page 3.
Page
There
3.
we go.
Yeah, you go.
There we
Page
go. We have a motion to affirm the recommendation of Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the special use permit request with the findings and conditions listed on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. I'm going to make just one quick comment that I want to make before the motion, but that's fine. I can make it after the motion. I agree with Shelley's comment that the only concern I have is odor, and that's a general concern I have about the industry. It's usually a problem with cultivation, not so much with retail. Occasionally you do see it with retail, and so I would just encourage you to make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep the odors inside the building. So, and is there any other comments or questions before we call the question? Seeing none, I will call the question.
Ingram, no. Godus, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Culp, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
I was here too, by the way. A long time ago when we were making those laws.
I remember
here.
that.
So I was a part of that process too.
Yeah. Well, we got our distances really wrong to start, evidently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Next item is ordinance number 22, 2018, and ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending the powers and administration of the Glenwood Springs Downtown Development Authority. This is a first reading.
Good evening. On September 6th, City Council directed staff to prepare an ordinance to amend the powers of administration of the DDA to increase the number of regular voting members, and the attached ordinance does that. Creates one seat for a city councilor appointed by the mayor or retains that seat, and then adds another seat so that there would be a total of 8, but only 7 regular voting members, with the city council seat voting only when there is a tie vote, or the attached ordinance actually in your packet was sent early, and actually we had intended the ordinance to also include language that says that the city councilor would be able to vote when there would not otherwise be a quorum, and so we'd like to offer that as a change, and maybe Carl can provide a little bit more information about that. And this ordinance would increase the number of regular voting members to result in an odd number, and most of the other city boards and commissions have odd number membership. With that, I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Yeah, a lot of other boards and commissions have really odd membership.
And it's only 7:18.
So do we need to just amend that?
Yeah, it is, and the kind of the first draft of the ordinance got into the packet rather than the final draft. In paragraph 3, underneath composition, the last line should read where there's a tie vote amongst the board, it should continue on and say, or when necessary to have a quorum.
Isn't that already in there?
No, it's just been the practice of the board always to utilize the council member to maintain a quorum.
Okay.
So we just wanted to make it express.
And Carl, how is that with other boards and commissions? I mean, my understanding is that every other board and commission that we have has a liaison and not an actual voting member. So can you talk a little bit why the DDA, why this is different?
We actually, it was mostly at the request of our council members talking about how hard it has been to keep a full a quorum available at the DDA. It is probably more important. The DDA does take actions and needs to take actions. Most of your boards and commissions are advisory only for most purposes, with the exception of the Planning Commission. So that's how I kind of differentiate it. And I think council has always been very interested in having that council member there at those DDA meetings. So that really is it. It was just a personal, not a personal, but a preference of council over the years, I think, to have that member vote when necessary.
I guess maybe we should potentially look at doing that with planning and zoning as well, because they take action, or can we?
Yeah, well, but you can't have a council member on the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Because
I'm the liaison and I'm not allowed to attend.
Yeah, I was going to
because
say
then
you're.
I can't sit in on meetings like this and
yeah.
be impartial, so.
So that's why it's just a different deal on the Planning Commission.
Okay. It just seems very unique.
Well, it is, and keep in mind that the DDA is a creature of state statute. It's not created whole cloth by the city. It is governed by also statutory rules and framework. That's why there's a reference back to the statute on the composition of the board. So I guess from my standpoint, I don't find it an anomaly that it's a little bit different, because in whole, it is a different type of organization from anything else that we have.
All right, any other questions for Carl? All right, is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, I will close it to public comment, bring it back to council for discussion and or motion.
So we're just moving to approve the first reading of this tonight? Yep. Is that what you're looking for? Yep.
With probably the direction to go ahead and amend it
that.
As discussed.
With, or necessary when to have a quorum. So, if you guys okay if I just go ahead and do a motion on this? So I would move to approve ordinance number 22, series of 2018, with the additional language to be added to section 2, paragraph 3, at the end of the last sentence, to also read, or when necessary to have a quorum. Correct? Yes. Okay.
Second.
All right, a motion by Todd and a second by Jonathan to approve the first reading of ordinance number 22, series of 2018, with the one amendment as noted on section 2, paragraph 3. Roxy, I think our voting buttons are still, thanks. Any further questions or comments? Let's go ahead and call the question.
Ingram, yes. Godus, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
All right. Next item is report from the city manager.
Oops. Do we?
It included in your packet was a letter from the DDA chairman, Steve Carver, regarding the DDA's unanimous recommendation that public restrooms on the south side of the river be located in the parking lot that is at 7th and Colorado, toward the corner of 7th and Colorado, so that it would be visible and could be monitored rather than another location in that parking lot. The board did consider other options that have been discussed before, and so we just wanted to include this letter and looking for any direction that you might have related to it, or you could just accept the letter as their recommendation.
All right, thank you. Any questions for
Are we trying to make a decision this evening, or just sort of to accept what's been presented to us?
I would suggest that we're not making a decision on this tonight. There's way more to it than this.
Yeah, I would agree.
We need more vetting between us, and then long-term planning, because, I mean, I already see an issue with, we've had discussions about this parking lot and whether or not that parking lot's the highest and best use, and if we get a parking structure and move all the government cars in there from the county and the city, can we you know, can this corner be redeveloped into something that's more active than a parking lot? And going and building what's designed here that's a $400,000 bathroom setup at least from this picture that was presented to us. So that scares me that we're going to go build this thing, and a few years from now, the county and the city's going to do its parking garage, and this thing gets blown up.
And I'd also say we don't have.
I just don't know if we're ready for it.
Well, we don't have two other counselors here.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I would also say that I've at least viewed these bathrooms as 60-40 maybe tourist amenity, and we don't have. I would love for them to take that same the tourism board, and take a similar process, similar look, and see if they reach similar conclusions. One of the things, and I think I expressed to you, Jen, one of my confusions was we have this really nice site location analysis of pros and cons, but there's actually nothing, there's no pros and cons for the specific location that was preferred alternative. It's like, here's pros and cons, user convenience, security, cost, design for everything else that we've considered except the actual preferred alternative. So I would just like, it's the only thing it's mentioned is we all agree this is a place that should go, but it doesn't talk about the process where it came and why that's the most preferable, at least from what I read.
Well,
go ahead, Shelley.
go ahead. Are you done? Was that a question?
Nope, that was a statement.
Oh. Well,
But
I had a
do you wanna
question.
respond to that statement?
I was a bit confused by the packet, and I realized there probably wasn't a lot of time for DDA to put something together for us, but everything I was looking at was the old designs, you know, the design under the bridge and the design along the north side of 7th Street. I don't see a map that actually shows me, and I'm having a hard time visualizing where in that parking lot they're talking about it going. And also, you know, what it would look like and that type of thing. So yeah, I think it's very preliminary to try to make any kind of a decision.
I think the original intent was to have the DDA have a conversation and to come back at a work session, and we can certainly go back to that plan if we'd like to do that. Regarding location, I think it's essentially the corner where the sunflowers are, kind of where that little bump out is, potentially.
The northwest corner, is that correct?
Yeah, the northwest corner, right at the
Right at
corner
the
of Colorado
intersection?
and 7th.
Okay.
It may be not exactly where the sunflowers are, but in that general location, someplace on that corner.
And is that a city-owned piece, or is that the county-owned?
I think
parks?
according to their letter, they are inferring it's a city-owned piece. We need to confirm that, but.
Okay.
We've
Because
seen
my
that map
memory
before.
was,
It's a
Yeah,
weird.
I thought
kinda
that was
chopped
maybe
up
the
a little
county
bit, yeah.
piece.
I
Okay.
couldn't say
Then I-
definitively.
Okay, because in that position, I guess if we could send some questions back to the DDA, maybe since they're not here tonight, but some of the concerns I had with that kind of alley and parking lot piece would be visibility, you know, access to it and people feeling comfortable accessing it through the alley.
Well,
I guess if
this
it's
would be
on
more
that.
right up on 7th Street.
If it's right up on 7th, then that's different. It's much more visible and the police can see it. But again, without a like a plot plan, it was hard to know where that was going.
Yeah, my understanding is it's literally right on the corner of 7th and Colorado on the southeast corner of the intersection.
So you kind of walk around it?
Yeah.
At the
yeah,
corner?
Yeah, so, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, a couple things. First of all, yeah, I completely agree that we shouldn't be trying to make the decision tonight. If for nothing else, we're down 2 counselors, and this is an important topic. So, totally on board with that. You know, this matrix here does show the city parking lot, but it sort of was evaluating the end of the alley, and yet the letter then concluded. And I would have to say, you know, the letter was pretty convincing to me. I do think there's some other issues like that Todd has raised that we need to discuss and really think through. But you know, in terms of whether it's a very viable site that we ought to consider, I certainly think that it is, and I think it is a better location for visibility reasons than the original site at the end of the alley. I'd sort of just like to thank the DDA for you know, putting together a rigorous analysis. We've heard from other people who, everybody always has an opinion, especially us, right? And they made an attempt to really bring some structure to this and identify the pros and cons of all these sites we've been talking about. So this was very helpful, and I think their preliminary location, preliminary suggestion for location is a very good one, and we'll give it serious consideration. I'll just throw this last thing out to the DDA as we think about. We're going to pick one of these locations, and we're going to build these bathrooms, and they are going to be $300,000 or $400,000, and so I want to follow up on a point that Todd made at I think our last meeting, which was if we're going to be building stuff, whether it's pedestrian bridges or whatever it is, and bathrooms, we've got to maintain them, and maintaining these bathrooms is it's not something where you have somebody swing by once a day if you want to keep a $400,000 bathroom nice. And so I've suggested, and we won't get into it now, but I'll throw it out there so people can begin to think about it, that at least in a number of countries you sort of see a full-time employee maintaining the bathrooms. So that costs $20,000 or $24,000 a year to protect our 400,000 bathrooms and keep them clean. Personally, I would be in favor of that, and we can talk some more about how does that get funded and the rest of that. But
you're gonna have an old lady in black charging 10 drachmas outside.
That's it works pretty well.
It does.
It feels a little strange in the men's room when the woman is in there, but it does keep them clean. So anyway, those are my comments.
The free mint and everything, man.
Handing out the towels.
Yeah, it's
I'm really impressed.
We moved through pretty good tonight.
Yeah, then we went off the rails.
Sorry, Jim, we didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you done?
I was done, thank you.
Okay.
So we'll bring this back. We'll have, I'm sure, a work session on this with the DDA and with ourselves, and we'll bring it back.
Yeah, I think Jonathan.
Oh, that's right. No, it's okay. I just wanted to see if we could also include the tourism board. I think that's just a really important piece to include them in the process. I would not want to have a work session without them personally.
Right.
And then I think also that just preferentially, 2 porta potties get the job done as far as space goes, and a lot of these conceptual designs, I know these are older, but we're talking janitor closet and storage rooms and bathrooms that, you could have 6 homeless guys lay down in. We could probably do 2 one-holer, not even 100 square feet, but twice the size of a porta potty times 2. Yeah. And it could be just, basically we put, to your point, Todd, about not doing something permanent there if we want to redevelop it, we could do something like a Portland Lou, 100,000. One of my biggest concerns, and this is why I would like John Hassel to comment on it if he's still around, and he's not, that's fine. Maybe you can just take the bullet, Jen. But, that's okay, I already texted him. But if, my biggest concern is security. I'm really concerned that these are going to become, even at that location where there's not people going by all the time, where you can't see under them, where there's not the activation, I'm just super concerned, and I know, Jim, you've shared this concern with me as well, of anywhere that they're going to be or any way they're not going to be able to be monitored for graffiti, for drugs, for whatever else happens there. It really concerns me. It doesn't have to be a Portland Lou, but a low-cost, nice alternative, and it doesn't even have to be low cost. It could be a lot of money, but something where you can see the ground level, and so people walking by can see it and have activation. I don't know if this is the right place or not for that, but that's how I'm probably going to vote 100% is security and safety, and not having a place that stresses our already overstressed police force. Mm-hmm. That's all.
I haven't thrown my 2 cents worth in. I did throw my 10 drachmas in, but not my 2 cents worth. So, I agree with your comments. And to Todd, to address your concern about us spending $400,000 on this nice structure and then tearing it down to put in a parking structure, I completely agree. But if we put in something like a Portland Lou, it's functional. It's not you know, really fancy, but it gets the job done. It's a lot better than a porta potty, and we could relocate them if we you know, redevelop that site. So, you know, I agree with Jim, with what you said. I think this letter is very convincing. You know, I think it's not a bad location for restrooms. I don't think we need to spend $400,000 on this site. So anyway, all right. So there you just got a whole mix of thoughts.
So did you, Jen?
Lieutenant Hassel is here if you'd like to ask him.
As soon as you stop to go to the bathroom, I just went on a scree about, you know, security and making sure that and I guess from, if you've read the letter, do you have two cent question or comment on what is your preferred alternative, or what are the things you look for? Not preferred alternative, but what do you look for?
Yeah, so I'm kind of standing in for Chief Wilson. I'm John Hassel with Glenwood PD. And from what I gathered from what his opinion is that we would like something that's visible, securable, and essentially for us to be able to patrol it from the street, from the sidewalks, so that it's not really in a hidden place. I know there's been discussion about possibly having these locked at night, which would be ideal. Otherwise, we're going to have transient life in there throughout the nights, and that creates a problem for both us and for the downtown.
What time do you see these being locked? I see like 10, 11 at the latest.
So we used to lock the bathrooms underneath the bridge at about 10 or 11,
okay.
But we do have bar life down there, so you know, it could be as late as 1.
Yeah, but those bars have bathrooms, and if you are down there, you're probably frequenting one of those places. They'll let you use theirs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would think 10 o'clock would be ideal.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jim.
thanks.
Okay, was that clear enough?
Yes.
That's clear. You don't have to answer that.
Shotgun approach? All right, any other items you had, Jen?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just needed to mention that we are going back into fire restrictions, into the stage 1 fire restrictions with the rest of the surrounding communities in the county. So that will be effective for us Saturday. Everybody else, it will be effective tomorrow. We have a noticing requirement that we had to meet, and that's why we're a little bit behind everybody else, but it will go back into effect on Saturday.
Okay. All right, thanks. Anything else from you? No? Carl?
I don't think I have anything.
All right. Council reports on boards, committee, and commission meetings. We haven't done that in about 6 months. Haven't had time. Anybody have anything they would like to report?
I don't.
I would report that Carl and Deborah and I just got back yesterday from I think a fairly positive trip to Washington, D.C. We met with the U.S. Department of Transportation, a group that is an advisory group with that regarding the opportunity zones. We have 2 economic opportunity zones defined in Glenwood Springs that should facilitate economic development in terms of bringing in some or incentivizing financing. It essentially gives people a break on capital gains. Then we met with Congressman Tipton's office, and we met with Senator Bennett and Senator Gardner's office. Then the next morning we had a meeting in the White House with the Department of Local Affairs,
Yeah, it's
or the Governmental Affairs. That's right. And the gist of it is that it sounds like our Build America application, which is the kind of the current version of the Tiger Grant application, is viewed fairly favorably by the U.S. DOT. We met with the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, and by the White House, whatever that group was again, the Intergovernmental Affairs group. They encouraged us to get our delegation to support the application, and we are in the process of pursuing that. We've got one yes from Senator Bennett. We're having a conference call tomorrow afternoon with, when we were in Washington, D.C., the reason we didn't meet with Scott Tipton is he was here in Colorado, and now he's back in Washington, D.C., and we're in Colorado, so we're going to have a conference call with him tomorrow afternoon, and then we are working on Senator Gardner. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, I would just follow up on that. A couple of things. That it was a really positive trip, and in particular, I think on the BEST grant, Senator Bennett's willingness to make a phone call on our behalf to the Secretary of Transportation, which is one of those things you really need to have happen to, get your application to sift to the top. The delegation has already provided letters of support, although I think they provided letters of support. There are 8 pending applications, grant applications from the state of Colorado. Last year, nobody was awarded a Tiger grant, although we made it into the last round with our application last year, which is part of the reason we went back again this year. I think these trips have real value in that regard. The other one is I'd hope that we would see regulations from the Treasury Department, the IRS, regarding these opportunity zones. They're a huge potential economic development tool. One of the first things that's has happened in a while that has some real possibilities. Hopefully Jen and I can put together some kind of a presentation once we know what the regulations are, because we would love to get folks who are in those zones, property owners, to understand what's going on, and this is going to be a much larger investment tool as well on potentially a regional basis, as well as seeing these opportunity funds come up at the national level as well. So a lot of really good possibilities coming out of the trip. So I think it was, I think in a lot of ways we gained more out of it than we did last year. Hopefully we can bring some money back, but definitely a positive trip, and I want to thank the mayor for taking the lead in terms of all these meetings where you're kind of one after another when you have 6 of them stacked up in a day, and you're kind of doing the same presentation but nuanced a little differently for the next group, and so I want to thank the mayor for doing that work.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks.
All you guys that went, so it's a lot of time.
Yeah, the opportunity zones, the 2 that are defined in Glenwood, one is north of, everything within the city limits north of the Colorado River actually goes beyond the city limits. I think it's
really everything north of the Colorado.
Everything north of the Colorado River, and everything east of the Roaring Fork River. So Meadows is not in, Red Mountain is not in, not that there's a lot of commercial development.
All of Grand Avenue?
All of Grand Avenue, all of downtown, all of North Glenwood. Really? All of West Glenwood, so the Hotel Colorado, 7th Street, Mall. Confluence, the mall, the cavern, or the quarry, it's all in.
Wow. The Confluence is only half in, actually, but it's the one area it's divided, I think, right at the railroad.
Oh, it is.
It is,
it's not the river. It's the railroad.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's the railroad. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And how does that get defined?
Their census tracts, and
okay.
Ashley Badish from Sustainable Strategies and I worked really hard to get a list to the governor of all the areas where we thought that this would be beneficial, and we worked with AG&C and the Enterprise Zone administrators and OEDIT. So we worked really hard to. There were a lot more census tracts that were eligible than the governor was able to nominate.
But I'm just thinking out loud real quick, not to belabor this, but the anticipated rules are going to allow or require that 90% of a fund be used within one of the opportunity zones. So that means 10% does not have to be, which means that perhaps even if we get a fund created.
Right, and I think what it is 90%. Actually, I believe it's in the tax bill. 90% has to be 90% of the fund has to go into business or projects, has to be invested, if you will. I think that 10%, what that isn't speaking to is that there's an overhead component to doing any of this as well, is more than likely what that 10% is looking at, frankly.
Okay. All right. Anyone else attend any other boards? Go ahead.
Yep, I attended the Arts and Culture Board last night. Brian was there. And actually before I got to the meeting late, but before I got to the meeting, they went through the list of applicants for the art piece for the North Landing site. And I think made their recommendation of 6 artists to move forward into that committee group. So that was pretty exciting. And then they also worked through the Arts and Culture Board mission statement and kind of their list of goals for the year. So they're looking forward to having a work session with City Council probably in November at this point, just to kind of update and get some direction from the council and present their goals for next year.
Great.
It's a good
We're going to
group.
get a bronze statue? No, I'm kidding.
I can't guarantee that, but
It's either that or, you know.
it's going to be beautiful.
You know, the Trevi Fountain or something like that from Rome would work, you know.
Must have been looking west, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Any other board, committee, commission reports? I, unfortunately, due to work conflicts, have not been able to attend the Transportation Commission for the last 2 meetings, but were you there?
No.
No. So Transportation Commission is running amok.
I have read the minutes though, and they're very invested in working through the traffic calming policy that they're working in the city. So.
Okay.
More stop signs, which we can now make. And 20-mile-an-hour signs, which we can now make in-house.
Speed bumps.
We get to pull, we get to pull stop
Roundabouts.
signs
I
out
don't know if we have a
of your
speed bump
traffic.
machine. I don't think we have a speed bump. We could get a speed bump machine. We could just.
Actually, like no kidding, they're talking about removable speed bumps because snow removal is really difficult with speed humps. So.
Well, the ones in my neighborhood seem to work pretty well.
We know.
I'm actually serious. You know, it's like the snowplows seem to do just fine with them, and they're just. It's a much smoother. They're really high, but it's a smoother.
They're very
transition,
effective because you launch off of yours.
Yeah, if you go 25 miles an hour over those, you're gonna probably end up bumper down in the street.
You should just plan on 20 miles an hour from your house all the way to here. You can come down Pitkin at 20, through your neighborhood at 20, through my neighborhood at 20, please.
When we, no, I won't go into that.
But you do know the meeting's still going on.
Yeah, okay.
These are recommendations from Imagine Glenwood. This is
So your light is flashing. Do you have anything you want to say, or was that already
Oh,
there?
that was for the previous,
Okay.
the Arts and Culture.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you.
I'm so excited to hear we have a stop sign machine. Just spit them out.
Yeah, it's brand new this year.